Donald Trump had the big Super Tuesday that he wanted. He won not every race, but he won a lot of them, and that's great for him. Well done, Slytherin, well done. But don't pop the champagne just yet, because you don't have to dive into the data too far to realize that Donald Trump's got a bit of a problem on his hands. It's so obvious that even Fox News is acknowledging it. Take a look at this.
You look at the exits for GOP voters tonight who won't guarantee their vote for the nominee. North Carolina, 35%. Virginia, 36%. California, 33%. That has been consistent, that there's 30 to 50% of people who don't want Donald Trump but identify as a Republican or are voting in that primary.
Okay, those are some inconvenient facts for Donald Trump from Jessica Tarlov, but it wasn't just her. They actually resurrected Karl Rove to come and warn Trump and his camp about this. Take a look.
The high command of Team Trump ought to be concerned about unifying the Republican Party, because as we see in the in these states, a third of the vote in Virginia, 43% of the vote in Massachusetts going to Nikki Haley, a quarter of the vote in North Carolina. Maine has now dropped down to about a quarter of the vote, but it was 31% for Nikki Haley. Vermont, 48%. There's still some work to be done to unify the Republican Party, and that's going to depend a lot on his tone tonight and whether or not he stops doing things like calling her bird brain and threatening that if you give money to her campaign, you're going to be permanently banned.
Can I just quickly point out that Karl Rove is no Katie Porter, by the way? Like, I love the visual aid, that's great, but he's not even looking at it, and he's very slowly going through numbers that are self-explanatory.
Before we continue with the story, we depend on members to keep on going. Don't wait, click join now on YouTube.
But they are self-explanatory. So presentation style aside, that's a lot of people who are still going out to support Donald Trump. And it's easy for him to be like, well, Vermont, for some reason, lets Democrats vote in the Republican race. Okay, that's true. It's a little bit weird. There's only a few states that do that, but not all of those states did that. There are 30 to 40% reliably in all of these races of Republicans who don't want Donald Trump. And they are not waiting, I venture to say, to learn more about the guy. Everyone knows way more about Trump than they want to at this point. They know him and they don't like him. Now, that does not mean that they won't vote for him, but as Nikki Haley alluded to, like, he does have to try to get that support. And it's easy to throw it, as we did jokingly, stop calling her bird brain. That seems like a pretty easy ask, but I don't think that they turned against Donald Trump just because he calls women names. I think it's probably a mix of different issues that they have with him, and I don't know whether he has the inclination or the ability to reassure those people in the time remaining. But that said, what's your diagnosis, Sharon? How many of those people do you think are lost to Donald Trump? And if he is gonna get some of them back, what would you have him do?
I think he's too far gone. The sickness, there's no cure. As you outlined there are people who know him well and they're done. They're not even left with the ability to hold their noses, and they just can't stomach it. He's putrid to them and they don't want any more. They know all about him. There's no more benefit of the doubt. And so it's a real problem. And the other problem for him is, not only does he have to win them over, but those donors that he kicked out of the party too, who he said, I don't want anything to do with you if you give a dime to Nikki Haley. And then some of them said, okay, others gave anyway. He needs that money. He needs that influence. And then you have Joe Biden who said, come one, come all. I know I'm not your first choice, second or third, but I'm better than Donald Trump and I'll be good to you.
Yeah, he was pretty harsh, not just to her, but to the supporters of Nikki Haley, and as you point out, to those donors. And they might take that personally. I mean, I don't even think that a lot of those donors really felt much of a connection to Nikki Haley. A lot of them supported other candidates first, but they were really desperate to block him, and they've failed to do that. They're gonna be frustrated by that. The one thing I would say in Donald Trump's favor, I guess, is that amongst all of his weird personality failings and weaknesses as a human and all of that, if almost no matter what you've said about him or how you've opposed him, if you just go and say that he's bright and shiny and great and has very large hands, he will bear hug you again. And so people have been able to get back in his good graces, including candidates. So sure, he called her bird brain, but he called Ron DeSantis even worse stuff, and he technically likes Ron DeSantis kind of now. I feel like that could probably translate over to the donors too. The question isn't whether like he has the capacity to accept them back, it's whether they want to go back. And it's over the next 6 months or so, as he's trying to do that, it's not like he's totally in control of what those voters hear about him. We're gonna be launching into like 4 different criminal inquiries. And a lot of them don't like the fact that he's a criminal in so many different ways. They're gonna be reminded of that on a daily basis and how much money is being wasted in defense of him that could be going to Republican candidates. So I think that could prove to be one of the biggest obstacles to locking down the rest of the party. Any final thoughts on that area?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And even before they get to court, there's the abortion issue that a lot of people still blame him for and can't get past. I mean, he did put this Supreme Court in place, the swing votes that carried it through and banned Roe v. Wade, it overturned it. So I think that it's an uphill battle for him, and we'll see what the criminal cases that seem to have been given a great assist by those people in robes up there to kind of go away or at least stall. We'll see how much comes out about that. But that does seem to be, just anecdotally, what a lot of people who went to the polls had to say about why they were done with him.
Yeah, and we're gonna find out a lot more. As people always say, there's this Trump derangement syndrome, but there's a different form of the Trump derangement syndrome, which I think is like the Trump denial syndrome, the Trump amnesia. It's sort of like it was so unrelentingly insane those days when he was president that I think almost as a defensive measure, the brain blocks it out. But it will be undeniable once again very soon, and maybe even now, because the general election is here. Democrats cannot just ignore the stuff that he says, because it's not gonna be about another Republican. It's gonna be about Joe Biden and other Democrats, and that might remind them that he kind of sucks. But that said, before we move on to our final topic for this block, I do wanna just say, like I try to give him credit when I can, maybe he has learned his lesson. Because on Truth Social, when he could have called Nikki Haley a bunch of names, he instead decided to be silent. And I don't mean that he didn't post. He did post, but there was nothing in the posts. And that's not what's interesting about this. The fact that back to back he sent blank messages. Do you see what's interesting there? Why are hundreds of people re-bleating these blank messages? Why are thousands of people liking these blank messages? They're responding to messages that don't have messages in them. And look, some of you might say it's just bots, but I heard that Truth Social was the voice of America. So I have a lot of questions. So weird. Anyway.
It's bots or it's indoctrination. It's robotic. The people that follow him who don't want to hear anything about the truth. It's just that's what they're trained to do. Okay, yeah. Hit that heart, like it, forward it, do whatever you have to do, because this is what we're trained and conditioned to do. It's very hard to break people free of that, it seems.
There's a lot of people who I'm sure are convinced by the blank message means that QAnon was true all along.
Oh my God.